Hey guys, my name is Rob Potter. Welcome to episode number 5 of Behind the Process. In these videos, what I like to try and do is give you guys a bit of a look at what goes into creating the final images of some of the photos that I go around and take. Now, my goal, if you haven't watched any of these videos, my goal with each of these videos is to give you guys a bit of some hints and tips. They're not meant to be full-on tutorials, but just give you guys hints and tips about what you can actually take away and hopefully apply to your own images. Now, there's a couple of things inside of today's photo that I'm going to show you, which I think you'll definitely, I know I certainly do, run into this issue a fair bit, and I'm hoping I can show you guys how to correct that today. Now, if you have watched all 5 episodes, or even 2 or 3, thank you so much for doing that. Let me know what you think. If you're liking them, I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. You might have a suggestion for me. I always welcome feedback, so thank you very much there. Now, first things first, if you're wondering where this photography location is, this was taken down at Bonna Point Reserve in the Sutherland Shire, down near Kurnell. Down south of Sydney, it is a good little location, and what I'll do, like all these videos, I'll put a link below in the comments section. I've started writing up the photography review for it, so I'll be up on Hotspots soon, but definitely jump over and check that out if you want to know more information about this particular location. Then you can grab your own camera, run down there and take your own fantastic photos. All right, just creaked my chair there. All right, so what went into making this photo? So this is the after. This is once all the dust has settled and everything's cleared, and I've done all my things inside of Adobe Photoshop and Photomatics and those sorts of things. This is what I've finished up with. Now, if you're wondering, well, hang on a sec, Rob, what's Photomatics? If you haven't heard of Photomatics, it's a HDR program. So basically what it allows me to do is it allows me to take 7 exposures, turn them into, take those 7 exposures, add them into Photomatics, and then Photomatics spits back a toned map version of all those images put together. Now, I won't spend too much time explaining that much further, mainly for the reason that I've covered that in other videos, and I want to sort of move on and make these videos not full-length tutorials, but rather hints and tips for you guys to apply to your own images. And that way, you know, hopefully I can keep it to about 15 minutes rather than an hour and a half, which is honestly what this image took me here. Now, the reason that I've picked this image is a couple of things. One, because it got quite a lot of likes and shares and comments on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Photography Hotspots. So thank you very much to everybody that likes, comments, and shares that. It's fantastic. So thank you again for that. Now, this, as I said, is the after. So I'll turn the top layer off, and we can see this is the before. So this is sort of what I started with once Photomatics gave me back my tone map image. Now, again, even if you don't have HDR, or if you don't do HDR photography, but you still want to get better at Photoshop, what I'm about to show you now can be built on top of a normal exposed image. It doesn't have to be a HDR image. So if you're in that boat, just think of this as being a normal out of the camera photo that we're now going to work on. And like any photo, when we open up inside of Adobe Photoshop, what we like to try and do is simply move around the image, have a look around the image, and work out what are some of the things we want to fix up inside of Adobe Photoshop. So, for instance, the very first thing that stands out to me are these poles that are now on a slant. Now, you might be thinking, well, were they on a slant, Rob? Like, what's that all about? No, they weren't on a slant. They were perfectly straight, but unfortunately, one of the drawbacks with wide-angle lenses, depending on the quality of wide-angle lens that you have, is you can get things like poles and buildings and all that sort of stuff slanting. Now, that's what's happened to me here, and I shoot with a Sigma 1020 lens, which I absolutely love, would not trade it for the world, but unfortunately sometimes it does give me this. So I'm going to show you today how to fix that up, because it's something, again, that happens a fair bit, and even not so much with a wide-angle lens as well. It might happen with the lens that you've got that you use a fair bit for landscape photography, but you find that all the things on the sort of the side of the image end up slanted. So that's one thing that I want to fix up. Some of the other things I want to fix up are something like these little spots. You've got this sunspot here, a bit of a rope there, and some little dust spots and smudges up there. The other thing, though, that I want to do is sort of brighten up this foreground, because for me, the sun's sort of coming over, and it's hitting this area, and I think this area should be lit up a little bit more. From what I remember, it was a little bit more visible. And also the path. This is the main area of my image. So I'm sort of, with the poles and the nice lines of the path, it's sort of leading people's eyes down and into the water. So that's what I want to emphasize. So again, it's important that when you're inside of Adobe Photoshop or whatever program that you're using, Lightroom, whatever it might be, just to have a look around the image and work out, before you start doing anything, okay, what is it that I'm trying to achieve during my post-processing? All right, well, let's see if we can achieve it together. So first of all, if you're aware of what I normally then go and do with my process, which hopefully you are by now after 5 videos, the very next thing that I do is I start to introduce some of the elements of the other exposures into my image to try and, again, correct some of the things that I want to fix up. So if we start to turn them on, the very first layer there is just a duplicate of the background layer, so to get us underway. Okay, so we can see the very first layer here is a layer mask. And that's one of, if I just hold down the Shift key to hide that layer there, hide the layer mask, I should say. This is one of the exposures that I took, one of the exposures that makes up the HDR image. Now, obviously we can see the sky's blown out, so I don't want that, but I do want the foreground. So I've just masked that area in, and there's a fair bit of masking that happens here. I can turn that one on, and you can see that now brightens up the path for me. So I'm already starting to take care of some of the areas that I felt were an issue. We've got, now you might not notice that so much, but got just a subtle, a little bit more light on this sort of mound here. And again, over here where the sun is. With all my images, what I'm trying to do is really sort of sculpt the scene. So give it like a nice depth to it and make it look very much 3D. So as if you're standing on that path, looking out, watching the sun come up. What else we got here? We've got a little bit on the poles just to bring out a little bit more of the details and help them stand out a little bit more from the scene. Okay, turn that one on, and I've got some of the light sort of hitting the shrubs and the trees. Again, just trying to sculpt it a little bit better. The water. Water can be quite a tough thing, I find, when you're shooting it, because the sun really sort of bounces off of it, acts like a big reflective dish. So with this image here, what I'll try to do is make the water a little bit sharper, but also it was definitely a little bit more blown out than what it came back with the tone map version. So add that back in there. And then last but not least, I don't know if you can see that, I'll zoom in a little bit there. But just to sort of emphasize the sun there, help that sort of blow out a little bit, as you'd expect from the sun. So again, there's a couple of different images that we've got there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 different, not different exposures, because some of them are actually the same, but 7 different areas that I've then brought back in. Now, even if you don't shoot HDR, what I probably would recommend while you're out and about and you're shooting, again, if you don't shoot HDR, is take a couple of different exposures. So set your camera up on bracketing, or even just do it manually and shoot a normal exposure, and then maybe shoot one that's overexposed or underexposed, or all 3. And that way, when it comes to post-processing, even though you might not do HDR, you might go, well, because of the image that I've got back, you know what, I wouldn't mind a little bit more detail on the foreground and just to bring that to life a little bit more. Or, gee, the sky's really blown out because the sun coming up over the horizon, so I'll bring back an underexposed layer or version of my image bracketed exposure and then sort of mask that back into my Photoshop document. So fantastic way of shooting. So again, I would recommend that even if you don't decide to do that, take a series of bracketed photos and then just pick the one that's best, because sometimes you might find the evenly exposed image isn't actually the better one. Maybe it's the underexposed or the overexposed. So it just gives you a little bit of choice when it comes to working on your images. Okay, so let's move on. Layer 2 there is just me sort of combining all of the layers into a brand new one so that I can move on. Noiseware. So this image here didn't have too much noise, thankfully. It was shot on a tripod at a very low ISO. But one thing that can happen with HDR that I find is that you can get quite a bit of noise. Now, I didn't get it too much in this image, but I'm sort of a little bit of a noise Nazi. I really don't like noise in my images. So pretty much all images, other than the ones that I want to look a little bit grungy, I will run it through a noise filter, and I've actually got a noise plugin. So if I go into filter and into here, let me just click on that layer so that we can see that. Filter, Imagenomic, and Noiseware. It's a fantastic plugin, and that's what I use. You can use, I'm using Adobe Photoshop CC, so you can go to filter and down to noise and reduce noise if you like. I just find that for me personally, the plugin works out a little bit better. Speaking of plugins, the second one that I've got here, the second plugin that I use is Topaz Adjust. Now I love Topaz Adjust. It really does some nice things for my images. Just adds that little bit of oomph, gives it a bit more color, a bit more pop, a bit more contrast, and it's another plugin that's fantastic. So I've turned that on and dropped that down to about 70% opacity so that I try not to overdo it too much, but you can see the difference that makes straight away. So before and then after. Okay, so this image here, now it looks like I've missed a step, which might actually be that layer 2, I've got a feeling. Okay, yeah, so layer 2, just to jump back a little bit there, sorry about that. I've come in and started to clean up some of the areas of the image that I didn't want. So the sunspot there, that rope, and a couple of the smudges and those sorts of things, which unfortunately we do get on our camera sensor. Okay, now levels. So this here, again, very subtle. So that's before and that's after. So basically just taking some of the red out of the scene. Levels is a fantastic way of doing a color correction, and it's something that I do for most of my images, even if I don't end up using it. Sometimes you'll do it and it's like, yeah, that just doesn't look quite right, so you end up taking it back out. But I do have a video tutorial on YouTube, on my channel, about how to do that, so I recommend checking that out, because color correcting your images does go a long way to making them more like what they were when you were standing there clicking the shutter, and helps make them a little bit more appealing. All right, so we come basically to the point where I think you guys are going to get the most value out of today's episode of Behind the Process, and if I turn it on, you'll see why. Basically, what I've done in this area here, this layer here, is I've now corrected those poles. So I've made them straight and blended them into the scene, and it wasn't all that hard. You might be thinking, oh my God, that looks difficult, Rob. Thankfully, it wasn't. Photoshop is very, very good and very, very clever at helping us out with sorts of things like this and straightening areas. So I'm going to show you that now. I'm just going to turn that off. I'm going to go Shift Alt Command E because I'm using a Mac, but it would be Shift Alt Control E on the PC. And you can see that what that does is that merges everything into a brand new layer for me. So everything that's visible, I should say, into a brand new layer. Now, for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click now on that layer, and I'm just going to convert that to a smart object. Now, the reason I do that is because anytime you apply a filter to a layer, if you just apply it straight away, it's actually going to apply that filter into those pixels and rewrite the pixels in that layer. Now, I don't particularly want that. I always like to try and work in a way that's non-destructive. So by doing that, we actually get these, and you'll see it here, like with your smart filters, you've got Topaz Adjust, and smart filters, again, you've got Noiseware. Smart filters, we've got Adaptive Wide Angle. What that allows me to do, and I'll show it to you guys, is it allows me at any time to double click on that layer, on this little icon here, and it'll open back up in that tool, and I can make any tweaks that I like. So it's not destructive. I can go back at any time and edit those pixels, which is fantastic. So let's straighten up these poles. We're going to go Filter and down to Adaptive Wide Angle. Now, what I'm about to show you now will work for pretty much 90% of any crooked building or any slanted object, any crooked horizon, and those sorts of things. It just, sometimes it does a really good job of it. Sometimes you have to persuade it that little bit more. It doesn't do it straight away. So let's come over in here and let's try and make some sense of this. We've got our correction. So I've got fisheye. We can see that at the moment it has actually sort of corrected things a little bit. So if I come down to the preview and turn that on and off, you can see what it's done. It's sort of basically, I don't know, like, looks like the horizon sort of dropped, and it's sort of like as if I'm sort of now standing on my tippy toes in the scene. So I don't quite want that, but sometimes it's, you know, that's actually, you might look at that and go, okay, well, I actually prefer it looking like that. We've got our correction up here. So depending on the different lens that you have, and maybe not even so much the lens, like fisheye, even though I wasn't shooting with the fisheye, it's usually the one that I end up using. But you can go through, and you can see that as I start to work through them, you can sort of see that some of them aren't doing anything, but others are doing something. So that's probably your best bet to start off with that. Again, probably 8 times out of 10 I'll say it's going to be fisheye. We have scale, so sometimes when you're doing this, it's actually going to crop into the image. I'm not a fan of that so much, but if I move out, you can see that to create the effect that to straighten the image like it has, or like it's tried to, it has actually bowed the image a little bit. So not too bad, but again, you want to be mindful of that because you can really crop into your image and remove quite a large amount of your image if you're not careful. Focal length, again, this is sort of saying to the image, wow, look at that, how much your focal length of the of how far you're zoomed in. That's what I believe it to be when you're shooting the image, and your crop factor. Now, all of these things I don't normally. I'm just going to reset that. I don't normally muck around too much with, other than the scale. What we're actually going to do is, if you watch the detail box, that allows me. You can see that when I move my mouse over any area of the image, I get in the detail box, I get a real zoomed in look, and that helps us out so much. Because what we have to do is we actually have to come in now and pick the different areas that we want to straighten up. So we basically start to look for lines, both vertical or horizontal, or both. So in this case, I want to fix up these poles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my mouse over to the outside and use that little detail box. I'm going to click on the first line that I want to correct. So I'm just going to left click and hold. And I'm going to start to drag down. Now, I'm sort of following that line down, and I'm actually also going to hold down the Shift key. Now, you can see that when I hold down the Shift key, it goes from blue to pink. Now, there is a reason that you're supposed to do that, and I believe it's along the lines of that by holding down the Shift key while you do this, you're sort of giving Photoshop a bit more permission to make its own interpretation of what it thinks it should be. So I'm going to come down the bottom at the very start of that pole, and I'm going to let go of the left click. And you can see that when I've done that, it's bowed that image a little bit more. So you might be thinking, well, Rob, that hasn't really done anything at all. But if I come back over to my image now, and what I want to try and do is line this line up here to the pole. So I'll come in the middle there, I'll click, hold down the left key, and drag, and hopefully meet that up. Okay, so I've done that, and you might be thinking, Rob, it's made the image worse, which it has, but bear with me. I'm going to now move over to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing, but on this pole. So again, I'll come in here, I'll left click, hold down the Shift key, and I drag down to the very bottom of that pole, like that, and I'm going to let go. So it has sort of straightened the poles. You might be thinking, well, it's straightened the poles, Rob, but it's sort of, I've got a smiley face now for horizon. So what I'm going to do now, and again, this tool, sometimes you just do one line and it works beautifully, and other times, like this, you do have to muck around with it a little bit more. So I'm going to come a little bit underneath that line there. I'm going to do a horizontal line this time. So I'm going to hold down left click, hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to drag out. I'm going to drag all the way across to the start of that line there, and I'm going to let go. Now we can see that when I've done that, it's now straightened up that line there. I could now come and do the horizon as well. So let's try that. I don't think I did it in the other image, but let's try that now. So again, just following that line, and I'm going to let go there. And I think that's done a pretty good job. Now you can see here that it's sort of, I've got areas missing, and if I wanted to, I could now go scale and drag that in and just see the crop that it gave me. So there we go. That's what it would give me. That's 100%. I don't really want to do that, so I'm just going to zoom that back out a little bit, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask this area back in. So I'll go OK to that. That's now going to apply it to that layer, and only to that layer. So there we go, you can see that it's sort of jumped out. I've still got, you can see I'm missing this area here, but I'm okay with that. Okay, we can see that those poles are pretty much where I want them. And you know what, it's actually done a pretty good job this time. I could probably go back in and sort of scale that out, but I won't. What I'll do is I'm going to apply a mask to it. So I'm going to come down the bottom here, and you can see this like a little Japanese flag symbol there, and I'll hover over it, it says Add Layer Mask. I'm going to simply click on that. It's going to give me white. So I don't really want white, I want black. So I'm going to undo that. And this time when I create that layer mask, I'm going to hold down the Alt key. So hold down the Alt key and you can see that that layer is now gone. It's still there, but using that layer mask I was able to make it completely hidden. So now all I need to do, the great thing, I love layer masks, the great thing I need to do now is just grab my paintbrush, make that brush a little bit bigger, grab a white colour, and black conceals, white reveals. So now I simply just paint away. Okay, so simply just coming in here and left click and paint, and that's done a pretty good job there. And then do the same thing over here, left click and just sort of paint in that area there. Okay, cool. So we can see that now if I come over and have a look at what I've done here, we can see that I've got two little white dots on either side, so they represent the poles in the area that I've masked back in. And that's pretty good. If I, again, like I mentioned at the start, if I now thought, yeah, you know what, I actually would rather go back in and maybe make some more tweaks. The great thing about using the smart filters in conjunction with that tool is now, as you can see, I can just double click, open that up, come back and make some more changes. So again, this will work for basically anything that's slanted. It could be your could be a building, could be trees, could be street signs, anything. The adaptive wide angle tool is a really, really cool tool. Sometimes it's a little bit fiddly like it was there. Sometimes there's just one line, you're good to go. So play around with that. Let me know what you think. But a fantastic little tool there. So let me turn that one on, and that was the one that I ended up with. And you can see that I've made another little tweak here just to fix up the horizon. I sort of had a look at that and felt that wasn't quite straight after I'd done that. So another little thing there. And then you can see that that's really made a difference. Basically coming in here, just sort of brightening up the foreground and adding a little vibrance. Great thing about vibrance is you don't actually have to muck around with any of the settings. You can see that if I open that up, it's 0 and 0. But by changing the blend mode to soft light and the opacity to 20%, just gives it a really nice, deeper, sort of more rich colour. You can see the sort of before and after. So I really, really like doing that. Merge them all onto a new layer. Levels 2 is basically just coming in and making this because this is sunrise, so just making that a little bit more red, just bringing out some more of the red in the sky. So if I turn that on, so before and after, very subtle, not too much. I'm again trying not to overdo it. So before, after. And then we've got, again, sort of like my soft light with the vibrance inside there. This next layer is this overlay and opacity of 5%. So you might not even notice it so much, but again, it just sort of increases the color and the depth. And again, that's what I'm going for. Nice depth in my images. And I find that by applying an overlay, so create a brand new layer, with everything in it. So again, the Shift Alt Command E or Shift Alt Control E, brand new layer, change it to overlay, opacity to 5 or 10%, and it just enriches your images. I swear to God, try it once I've finished. Once you've finished watching this video, you'll be pleasantly surprised at the effects you'll get when using it on your images. Okay, layer 11 is not much. That's just basically me coming in and again just creating a brand new layer of everything, and so I can move on. And then I've got my vignette, which I actually have just created a video tutorial on Photoshop, on the YouTube channel, in 3 ways to create a vignette. So check that out if you're not quite sure about vignettes. But vignettes is something I do on all of my images. As you can see, it sort of darkens up the corners and helps people's eyes come to the center of your images, which is obviously where you want them. Okay, last but not least, if you do watch these episodes, you'll know that, well, hang on, Rob, you've got unsharp mask there, but you usually do that down the bottom. You're absolutely right. I normally do. I just forgot this time. So at the very end, I went, oh, you know what? I haven't done a sharpening. So I've gone and grabbed my unsharp mask, which is quite high, 100% at 1.2. But I do love my unsharp mask filter. And that's it. That's basically it. So that's the end product. So again, before and after, this is the after. And I hold down my Alt key and click on that little eye icon there, and you'll see the before. So there you go, guys. Again, if you're liking these videos, let me know what you think. I'm keen to bring you some more. For those people that did like, comment, and share this photo on Facebook, thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate it. If you're liking these videos, hit the subscribe button down below. If you have any Photoshop questions, jump over to the Facebook page and leave them there for me. Let me know what you'd like to know more about, and that way I can help answer them in these videos. But until next time, guys, thanks very much. Remember to jump over and check out Photography Hotspots for more great Australian photography locations, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.